Welcome to RCast, the official podcast of the RChain Cooperative. RChain is a complete, concurrent blockchain platform designed for maximum efficiency at minimal computational and environmental costs by utilizing proof of stake. Beyond our platform, our investment partner, Reflective Ventures, funds organizations that are working within our core mission statement to create a better world by enabling social coordination in robust, secure, and scalable ways. I'm Derek Barris, the Director of Content for RChain. Each week on RCast, I'll be talking with the founders of our portfolio companies, as well as co-op members, staff, and other figures in the RChain ecosystem about the most pressing issues in blockchain today. Please check out rchain.coop to learn more about the platform, our community, validator sale, and information on becoming a member. Blockchain is a hell of a bet to make. At least that's what John Wantz, the CEO and founder of Every, told me during our conversation. Every is a loyalty rewards program based on blockchain. They're currently running on Ethereum and will be building on RChain upon mainnet launch. The claim of the company and what John and his crew is going for is to provide the only solution to protect and monetize consumer data while elevating brands' awareness and engagement goals in a unified retail and personal privacy landscape. Let's give that a little bit of context before we get into this conversation that we had. Like so many of us, I suffer from what's called banner blindness. When I log onto websites, I literally don't see the banners. I scroll right past them, shut off the videos right away, have my pop-up blockers on. Some sites I just refuse to go to at this point. USA Today is a great example. It's not a great paper anyway, but once in a while an article will catch my interest, and as soon as I see it's theirs, I will not go there. The advertising model is broken beyond repair at this point, what the internet has turned into. As I mentioned in our conversation, over half of all user data on mobile phones is dedicated to downloading ads. So we're paying for a system we don't want to have any part of, and it's really not only distracting, but it's quite numbing at this point. Now, one thing about this system that bothers me even more, if possible, is that when I buy from a brand that I enjoy, all of the ads that I see on my browsers for the next days or weeks are for that brand. Now, if I'm already a fan, why is that space being wasted? The company is paying for that space, but I'm already involved in their ecosystem. I'm going to use them. I'm going to go back to them most likely, but they're wasting their money reaching out to me when I'm already involved. I see this on all sorts of platforms, on the ad buys in the New York Times and the New Yorker and on Instagram. I personally have never been a big fan of ads. I don't watch the Super Bowl to watch the commercials. But sometimes something catches my eye. For example, the standing sitting desk that I record all these podcasts at. It was a really good price. It was on my Facebook feed. It might be the only Facebook ad I ever clicked on and made a purchase from. And then for weeks after, that ad kept appearing. And the problem is, how many autonomous desks am I going to need? Not many. Hopefully not another one for a long time. So, John Wantz, everyawards.com. They currently have 250,000 people who have opted into their program that spans over 230 brands. They, like RChain, are a co-op, and he is a very big fan of the public blockchain model. Although, as you'll hear, he thinks that for blockchain to reach mass adoption, we're probably going to have to move onto a private model for at least most companies in the beginning. And we see that playing out already. I don't think there's any real debate whether or not that's going to happen. Now, what side of the fence you fall on in that debate's a different story, and maybe we'll dedicate a podcast to that one day. It was a great talk. John is a very lively character. I enjoy talking to him, especially because, honestly, besides being annoying at ads, I don't think too much about them. Again, don't buy a lot of stuff. I get what I need when I need it, and that's that. I don't get swayed or pulled by things, at least not any more than I don't realize that I do. And that's the thing about advertising, is it's seeped in every facet of our lives, so it's always apparent. What John and Every is trying to do is to make a better relationship so that when the brands you actually do enjoy, you want to let them know about who you are and what you're looking for, you can have a dialogue. Right now, we're just seeing monologues thrown at us by randomized ad networks. And as I said, that's just not working. The very first line of your biography says you're a serial entrepreneur. Why is that?
Because I've had a hard time ever working for someone else. I've been real fortunate to kind of land in technology, well over a decade ago. And, my very first project and startup that I worked at was a photo sharing startup that was looking to kind of build kind of like a white label platform to power photo sharing capabilities inside of like newspaper sites and blogs. This was kind of pre-Flickr acquisition of Yahoo. I had a great mentor there who was the CEO and founder, and he had just exited selling a company to Digital River. I didn't even have an email address and really know how to type very well when I got the opportunity to work there. What I learned from him was, his name's Kendall Wouters. Kendall gave me kind of an opportunity to touch all areas of the business. And so, after my first week there, I was kind of hired to do like data entry and sales. He asked me to kind of come down and sit in his office that following week. And I didn't know if that meant I did a good or bad job my first week. But without much dictation or direction, he just gave me an opportunity to kind of witness and be exposed to what it's like to run and operate a business, a technology startup. I got close access to see what the fundraising process was like, the customer acquisition side of things, operations, legal, technology, finance, because he was kind of an all hands on deck kind of leader. Since that opportunity, I've just been real lucky in being recruited or being part of just early stage venture opportunities, and I've had a blast doing it. And so over the last 6 years or so, started a couple ventures here in Seattle. One was focused on retail and e-commerce. We were working on powering the buy now and e-commerce capabilities inside of social channels. We were working on buy now buttons before they were called buy now, and we were part of some of the early test programs. PayPal, Stripe, Twitter, and Pinterest all had deployed. Put a lot of time and effort into that, and then ultimately consumers just weren't buying inside of those channels, so that venture wound down. And then I had a chance to co-found kind of a VoIP platform that AT&T ended up licensing some IP from as well. After the commerce startup, I spent some time working in the innovation group at Target that was not necessarily touching or working on anything core to Target, but it was more looking at the developing and launching of complementary business lines. And so it was kind of launching startups inside of Target, to kind of summarize that. So I've always really lived at the kind of the early stage of ventures and the ideation, the capital formation, team building, product market fit analysis, and been able to kind of rinse and repeat in a few times.
So you've spent a lot of time working in retail environments. What kind of relationships do you foresee possible between consumers and brands in terms of what you're trying to bring forward with Every?
The retail environments that I've been accustomed to are centralizers, and so whether it be Target or the projects that I worked on with Pinterest and other retailers, it's always been to kind of sit between consumers and brands. And when we talk about brands, the simplest explanation is a brand and manufacturer. And so, that's a Levi's or a Stussy, a company that has taken time to develop something, produce something, develop brand around a product or commodity that they're bringing to market, and are looking to develop those direct relationships. So typically retailers sit in the middle of those relationships and ultimately commoditize the value between a brand and a consumer, meaning they'll compete with brands. And so you think about JCPenney's or Costco and the private lines that they develop. JCPenney's and Costco and Amazon, they don't necessarily have artisans or designers or creators that are in-house thinking about, what's new and what needs to happen in the market. They're responding to the interactions between brands and consumers, and they're looking to copy attractive interactions. And so Amazon has produced their Amazon Basics, in the last year. They've grown their private lines by, I think, like 6 or 7 times to really compete with the network of brands and consumers. And so to get back to the question, what could change or what's the opportunity? Brands they're just hungry to know and understand intimately the people that desire their goods. And so they want to know that information. So obviously, first and foremost, they can market better to other people like us. They can market better to us in the form of loyalty and kind of making sure that they have the greatest opportunity to grow our lifetime value with them as a brand. And then, they also want to know more about us so they can make better products to serve us better. And when a retailer sits in the middle of those interactions, ultimately it negatively impacts the market, and you're seeing lower quality products that are made to be really thrown away, to be turned through, because if a retailer or a centralizer kind of owns the relationship, and that's where you kind of go to do your repeat purchasing, it behooves them to increase the frequency in which you make those purchases. And so, quality comes into question, price comes into question. A lot of times when retailers own that relationship between a brand and a consumer, and they replace that relationship between the brand and the consumer with private lines, they start to manipulate the price of the products. And so I think the example I use often is, when Amazon knocked on Duracell's door and said, "Hey, we'd like to, ask you to white label a battery for us." Duracell said no. So Amazon went around their back and was able to establish relationships directly with the suppliers for Duracell. And then they launched the Amazon Basic battery. This data is about a year old, but at one point, Amazon Basic batteries was about 90% of batteries sold online. And then once that market share and control occurred, battery prices started to increase online, and Amazon started to optimize their margin opportunity with that. So at the end of the day, if brands can know their consumers and be able to transact directly with their consumers and have this intimate data-driven relationship with them, I wholeheartedly believe that the only technical infrastructure right now that's available for that is blockchain. Right now, whether it's a brand trying to sell direct to their consumer through Shopify, even Shopify itself is turning into a marketing platform and centralizing the data. So brands really need to get very creative and need to be motivated and are very motivated to find new ways to connect directly with the consumers, specifically getting access to that consumer data. And right now, blockchain is a hell of a bet, I think, to make in allowing for the removal of all these middlemen, whether it be the marketplaces, payment platforms, or e-commerce platforms that are trying to sit between them and their consumers from a data standpoint.
I want to get into blockchain, but I have noticed you've been a little critical of Amazon in some of your writings. I have my own problems with them. I don't know if you saw this week, The New York Times podcast, did a deep dive into delivery services and the toll that it takes on the workers. And it was all on women who have miscarried at work because they were forced to do what their doctor told them not to do. So there's that layer. But I would love to know more specifically what you're critical of Amazon for and what your platform is doing to resolve those problems.
In an organization at Amazon scale, as they continue to pursue shareholder appeasement, you got to keep in mind that regardless of how their capitalization structure is, and obviously the perpetual upside that Bezos continues to pursue, while for years and years any shareholder at Amazon failed to see a dividend, kind of kudos to them for excelling in a capitalism environment. They're doing their job. At the scale that they're at, the example that you outlaid, and also some of the devastation that I was starting to hit on with brands, the network that they leverage to pursue their capitalistic endeavors, it starts to become significantly taxed, and that's humans are going to see the repercussions of that. Shoppers are seeing the repercussions of that. Brands are seeing the repercussions of that. I wonder sometime, kind of shifting into some of my some of the critical, statements I've made about Amazon. They're smart. I've never met someone that works at Amazon that I wouldn't say is talented, strong-minded individual. It's more the machine that's been created that is Amazon is really oriented around extracting value around all participants it touches. So, for example, there's been so many times where I've met someone, or I've understood how their organization works, where it's not necessarily someone that works on a product or someone that works on a specific category or apparel line. It's more supply chain integrators. And what I mean by that is they're intentionally designing and orchestrating their operation to extract all value from any vendor, any participant that they touch. And that's heavy. You think about traditional retailers, you think about traditional marketplaces needing to facilitate healthy orchestration between the supply and demand participants that they're looking to connect. What at the point in which a marketplace openly cannibalizes one side of the market, and then the consumers don't change their behavior, that really, I think, allows for that centralizing marketplace to double down on that strategy. And that's what Amazon's done. So I don't know too much about kind of the AWS side of the house. I know that I don't want to say been caught, but it's pretty open that they track and understand the utilization of their platform, and they build products around the economics of how people are using AWS. So for example, they do a really good job of backing their pricing into how companies building on Amazon are leveraging that service. And so that in itself starts to feel predatory. But for me, not the retail, but more the marketplace side of the house, where they've been able to enjoy all of the benefits and insights from the marketplace that's been developed on their platform, and now turn towards consuming all of the value, is kind of scary, especially at the efficiency and the scale that they operate at. So for me, it's simple. Brands have looked at Amazon as a helpful platform to meet consumers. And, in a short time, in under 10 years, they've become probably, the strongest competitor to the brands that once looked to them to be a helpful channel. And as they continue to scale and eat up more and more of online sales, there's very few alternatives. Walmart is continuing to follow some of these commoditizing tactics, and their private line development is growing at a faster rate than Amazon. So brands are kind of in a corner, and us as shoppers, we're going to see less selection. We're going to see controlled prices. And, the antitrust and anti-monopoly laws in this country aren't set up to handle in Amazon. Regardless of what Trump does or doesn't tweet about, the lawmakers are really handcuffed to respond to the scale of control that Amazon has, specifically in retail. And as they move into CPG, and as they move into other service categories, as they do as supply chain integrators, it's going to be, I think, scary to see the economies that they impact and control. It's only a matter of time before I think regulators are going to have to take a deep breath and really think about how to address the amount of control that Amazon doesn't want to have over brands or retailers or CPG, but more over consumers, because the control that they will maintain of a consumer spending, I think, over the next 10 years with what they're doing with Prime and services and healthcare, I think it gets scary.
That brings into question data and security. I think one example, there's a company called Roan that I like a lot. Besides media, I've also worked as a fitness instructor for 15 years, and I'm 6'3". I have a particular build, and a lot of clothing manufacturers don't really get what I'm looking for, but this company called Roan does. So I've bought from them, and yet now everywhere that I go online, every time I'm on the New York Times or on Instagram or something, I just get Roan ads, Roan. In my mind, that doesn't make sense to me because I'm already a fan. I already have a relationship with them. I purchase from them regularly. So why am I flooded with all of this advertising? Is this something you've looked into in terms of how retail interacts or brands interact with their customers online, and how they funnel through that sort of advertising system?
That's a great question. So, I think consumers, when they get retargeted or they drop into Facebook and, oh, wow, there's a brand that I have an established relationship with. I think sometimes consumers probably feel like there's a well-oiled, well-orchestrated machine that's helping their brands connect and coordinate ongoing relationships or activities with them, and it's just really not. All of the systems that are used to market to us as consumers, they don't talk to each other, and that's by design. Facebook or Adobe or AdRoll or Twitter, as brands are trying to connect with us and understand us and coordinate with us and just develop nurturing relationships, it's very hard for brands to understand us and how we move us across channels, because these individual channels that make a lot of money from marketing to us, they're not economically motivated to connect with each other and help each other kind of coordinate how our data as consumers move across those channels. Not to hit again on blockchain, but that's something that we're pushing really, really hard into. We think that our data and the value of our data moving across those channels, it will be pinnacle to the success for a brand marketer in the future. And that right now, from a market landscape standpoint, that kind of unified hub doesn't exist. And so brands really, they don't have a lot of options. That's why the term walled gardens, where the Facebook ecosystem with WhatsApp and Instagram and I would say Apple and Google, inside of these economies and inside of these walled gardens, consumer information can be more leveraged, between Facebook and Instagram and between Google ads and Google search display ads. There is an opportunity to have a little better orchestration, but brands, because they're trying to develop direct relationships, I think that's the priority, is wanting to know deeply about a consumer. They're out there trying a whole bunch of different systems with different results and different levels of data about a consumer, or really different levels of information around how an ad campaign did or didn't perform inside of that channel. So they're really operating at a loss. And the metrics and the insights that are provided to them by these ad networks are not very revealing as to what a brand really wants to know. They want to know kind of who you are, what kind of audience do you sit in, are you interested in their brand, what kind of engagement have you had with their brand, and ultimately, are you going to produce revenue for them, and should they be spending time bugging you and chasing you around? And I could go on and on about how right now the marketing landscape and the analytics and the MarTech and landscape is not necessarily set up to help brands be successful, but more keep brands trapped inside of those SaaS platforms, inside of those ecosystems, while brands, and this is significant, I think brands continue just to fund the perpetual audience building and the centralizing of data of shoppers. So what I mean in that is brands pay Facebook, brands pay ad networks to go out and grow audience so that the brands can see benefit from those relationships. Brands are directly funding the centralizing of shopper data that's then used back against them. That has to change. If brands are going to be able to know consumers in the future and not be commoditized and relegated out of the relationship, there's got to be a different way for them to use their resource, which is their margin and their budgets, in order to have sustainable relationships with consumers, so that on the other side of the fence, so that us as consumers have TV commercials, print ads, display ads, retargeting ads that actually make sense for us. Because the most frustrating things for me is I'm a cable cord cutter. We haven't had cable in our home for about 8 or 9 years. We obviously use Netflix, tried Hulu for a little bit, but for me, the time wasted on commercials is the most exhausting exercise in humanity. It's just insane that we have to spend time and attention with brands and with mediums that aren't relevant to us. And that sucks for both sides. It's terrible for consumers. And can you imagine being a brand that's spending, time and attention and money and resources advertising to people that don't even want to know them? The centralizing cable networks and advertising networks are making so much money not refining the connection between brands and consumers, but yet centralizing and controlling those interactions, that they're just not motivated to change. And so something needs to happen there.
And I also read bandwidth costs. I forget the exact percentage, so I don't want to quote something, but a very high percentage of what you use for your phone just to load an internet page, it just goes to ads.
Yeah. That should be illegal.
Exactly. But you've brought up a lot of problems, but obviously you're working on solutions. And I want to know why you think blockchain will offer solutions to these problems.
Sure. And, we're not trying to boil the ocean. I think there's a couple key use cases when it comes to data and consumer data and shopper data that I think are pretty material and could maybe unlock broader opportunities, whether it be, opportunities we pursue or other opportunities the market pursues. But for us, everything we've talked about, it boils down to the interactions and ultimately the data that represent us as consumers. It's information about our socio-demographic information. So that's, what kind of people groups do we live in? What kind of personalities do we have? What kind of affinities do we represent? What's our gender, our racial profiles? All of the information that pretty much just kind of boils down into these like taxonomies that these ad networks and these analytic companies kind of organize us as. That information is wildly important and valuable. We're kind of, consumer trust and privacy and data is becoming a thing now. And I think people understand that there's an opportunity for them to participate in it. I think the end of this year, I think there's enough data and there's enough research coming out and there's enough actual polling taking place because of the Cambridge Analytica stuff, all the perpetual data breaches that are taking place. I think people are finally starting to understand that the interactions that they've had with these networks and platforms have derived value for those entities. And consumers, while Zuckerberg will sit in front of Congress and talk about this is how they provide a quote unquote free service to consumers is by advertising to them and using their information, I think people are starting to see what they're missing. And I don't think everyone's, waking up and saying, I want to protest because I want my $8 of value that Facebook's going to see off of me this quarter. But I think people are starting to understand that, some of the largest market cap companies across the globe have derived value based on the participation people have had with it. And so for us, we're trying to just boil that simply down to in focusing on the data that goes into advertising for retail. And so our team has pretty significant background in retail. And if we can help people start to protect, control, and really monetize their data, we're growing a network of brands that are willing to kind of receive that data and have a permissioned relationship with the brand as it pertains to the relationship with the consumer as it pertains to how they receive that data, steward that data, and how they use that data. And if you can imagine being able to have your data and what a brand does with it tracked, and let's say your data is maybe more valuable than my data because your data went into an ad campaign that produced better results for a brand than my data it did. There's an opportunity for the utilization of a consumer's data to be for them to see upside and see rewards and discounts and loyalty points for how their data is used at the point of sale, used in advertising, used in marketing. Without the blockchain, there's no real way to allow for a consumer to own and control their information. So we're big believers in public blockchains. We're big believers in the actual corporate infrastructure that houses this information being democratically kind of owned and controlled by consumers. So blockchains that are focused and built and orchestrated around models like foundations or co-ops are really interesting to us. We're a co-op. We've built out a legal corporate infrastructure that allows for the members, and for us members or shoppers, to kind of own and control the entity. And part of that is to help the data governance aspect of our business so that it's kind of future proofed. So it can allow for, should an acquisition ever take place or a partnership ever take place, the members who are the shoppers can have a role in that. And we think that's healthy for, democracy of data. And, ultimately the mandate of the co-op for us is to allow for people to secure, regain control, and monetize their information. And so our job now is to go out and find consumers of that information that will give shoppers upside and reward. And again, retail and brands and discounts on products that you want to buy, we think is a hell of a way to start. We think grocery and CPG and ultimately travel might make sense. But for us, we're laser focused on branded manufacturers that are kind of being relegated out of the market, as we mentioned before, by folks like Amazon, who are looking to have a more data-driven direct relationship with consumers. So we're just trying to very simply kind of connect those two dots right now. And we've grown a pretty tangible network of over 250,000 shoppers that have opted into the platform and said, yep, let me start to use this wallet that I can answer polls and surveys and start to have this participatory relationship with a platform that's going to let me control my data, monetize my data, permission my data, revoke those permissions, and actually we think that retail and discounts and loyalty points is a hell of a way to start to gamify and move people into the mindset of, hey, how do I use my data? How do I let other people use my data? What is it worth? What is it not worth? And we think that, we're going to be working on this a long time. And we just think retail and discounts on products is a great place to start.
Can you explain a little more in depth how your rewards program works?
Yeah, so think of it simply as loyalty points. So we have, I think, over 230 brands as of today that have adopted our wallet. And if you drop onto one of their websites, there's a little icon that says, hey, start earning rewards. You as a consumer, you can start to create a profile. You get some points just for creating your profile. You can get some points for answering some surveys and questions. Our COO, who's a former head of global marketing at Amazon, she has, let's just say, some experience in understanding global consumers. And so we've built out a pretty sophisticated shopper taxonomy that lets us start to organize all of this information about shoppers and process it in a way so that brands can derive meaningful insights. And ultimately, what we look to announce and move towards is developing an ad network on the back of all of this shopper data, so that as shopper information is not just received at the point of sale or received as you're visiting a site and answering those polls and surveys, but as we move your data into analytics and insights, you can see rewards for that, more points. And then as we use it in advertising, you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, you'll earn more points. It's kind of a one-for-one, meaning if you visit a brand, the information that you represent as a consumer is meaningful to that brand and is really performant from an insights and from an analytics standpoint and from an advertising standpoint, you're going to see more upside. And as I mentioned earlier, if my information doesn't map to performant insights and performant advertising for a brand, I won't see a bunch of points and rewards. So a consumer, we're making all of that really, really simple. You're just going to earn points for the engagement with the brand. And as they use your information, you just earn more points.
When you approach brands, what kind of responses have you been receiving? Is there a big learning curve for them understanding blockchain, or do they understand what you're trying to put forward?
So blockchain to a brand today is an unknown paradigm. And so our value prop is oriented around, we want to map into their existing spend that's associated with loyalty. And so I think right now around 22% of a marketing budget for brand and manufacturer goes towards loyalty points and coupons and rewards and discounts. So that's the budget that we're super focused on with our go-to-market. We want to replace and or be their loyalty program. And we don't talk about blockchain. We don't talk about data governance. We don't talk about hard forks, none of that craziness. It's just about coming to them and trying to introduce a medium and an opportunity for them to just engage their customers, incentivize their customers with rewards and discounts. This is activity that they do today. This is things that are important to them today. And then our roadmap, as I mentioned, is to grow the level of insights and understanding of these customers and start to unify a couple different programs, because typically analytics and insights doesn't really talk to the loyalty programs. So we're going to start to merge all of that together. And then, as I mentioned earlier, starting to turn this data into media campaigns, whether it be email campaigns or SMS campaigns or advertising campaigns, display ads. That's the conversation we have with brands. And so we're talking to them about areas that they already have spend in, they already have budget in, they already have resource allocation in, and we just want to map into their existing workflows and ultimately enhance them, because this data, brands have never had access to this level of information. The most information a brand will have had access to is like your shipping address if you happen to buy something direct from them. If you buy something through Amazon or another marketplace, there's very little information that ever gets passed to you about a consumer if you're a brand. And so for us, we want to unlock a level of information about their consumers that's super relevant, helps them be just much more performant in marketing and in the marketplace than they were yesterday. And so we try to really boil that conversation down and make it easy for them to install. Like right now, we're super focused on Shopify. It's a platform where a lot of brand and manufacturers are on. They can install the wallet and get it dropped into the website with just a few clicks. So we're looking at deploying on BigCommerce and then Magento in next year, so we can kind of start to open up that area of the market as well. And then we've also deployed an open API. So like any brand, we have a few brands today that aren't on Shopify that have just used the API to real easily drop the wallet into their UI as well. We're trying to make it easy, obviously from a tech install standpoint, easy from a value prop for them to understand, and really make this about things that matter to their bottom line, which is deeper relationship with their customers and better performant marketing.
One thing a lot of people have mentioned to me is that blockchain will receive more mass adoption when it's completely invisible. And a lot of companies are trying to make their tech invisible so people don't ever have to engage with it or really understand it for it to work. Now, with your platform, with all of the fluctuations that have been happening in the crypto market, is your rewards program affected by that?
The points that we've talked to that consumers own, they are token backed. So, our token does back those points. So for us, it's meaningful because our points can work across brands. So the way loyalty points work today is a brand will just pretty much lose margin. Like they'll just give you a discount. Like the points, like Starbucks rewards, the points you earn for Starbucks, those aren't a thing. They're not an asset. They're just literally a discount Starbucks is giving. There's new accounting laws that are coming into play where the CFO is going to be required to actually pre-book the potential loss that's going to be afforded in rewards and in loyalty programs. And that's going to really make marketing and using loyalty points a little bit more challenging. So our token is an asset. It's a currency for our network. It's the medium that backs the value exchanges when the points are used in network. So points are used not just between brands and consumers, but brands and publishers from an advertising standpoint, and then obviously brands, and then our platform from an insight standpoint. So the points, which are backed by our token, is backed by our cryptocurrency. Our currency is only deployed in our network, the token. And so, we have monetary controls and we're able to just price it in network. Should any of the brands or any of the shoppers, move the token out of network, and eventually if a secondary market were to develop with our currency, we would have to respond from a pricing standpoint with that. And so I think we have time. We do talk about monetary policies on how we would smooth and organize and stabilize the currency in network, because obviously you as a consumer, you're not very interested in earning some points and then showing up tomorrow and your points are worth half what they were yesterday. We're looking at all of that. We have a person that came onto our team a little bit ago who launched and ran Coke rewards globally for Coca-Cola. So Coke took a little different of an approach with this, where they thought of their points as an asset from the onset and actually put it on the balance sheet. And they went out to program partners and sold points for cash. So he's got a good background of understanding point price volatility and how to operate and scale a network when you actually have a fungible asset that represents the points. There's a lot of I hate the term, but kind of secret sauce going into how we stabilize a lot of that. We've looked at stable coins. We're still open to the idea, finding the right monetary policies on how to back and stabilize that value, whether it be consumer data that stabilizes the value and or potentially kind of products that are actually processed in network. We're looking at some of that stuff, but monetary policies that are very obviously kind of regulatory friendly and appropriate, we're looking at all of that.
A little more big picture, but what do you think it's going to take to get blockchain into a phase of mass adoption around the world?
I think it's kind of an unpopular response, but I think it's going to be enterprise adoption. And I think my fear is if we're just talking about blockchain adoption, it's, my fear is that we're going to see a universe of private chains where these private chains adopted by enterprise will help two things. It will help speed up some of the interdependencies within a large enterprise organization. So for example, at Target, I couldn't even begin to tell you all of the different systems and databases and workflows and data management rules that just existed inside of Target. So I could see private ledgers being utilized to help, large conglomerates kind of move data and help manage data governance policies internally, which could, to your point, it could speed up blockchain adoption, but not necessarily help speed up the democratization of value being shared with network participants, which I think public chains could unlock. So I kind of feel like there's going to be, fast forward, 5 years, there's going to be this window where there'll be some projects that believed in and adopted public chains. And these public chain projects are probably going to be tokenized projects where the network participants have a motivation and a level of participation on the value and the growth of that network through a multitude of different means and rewards. But then I think what we're going to see if you want to talk about mainstream blockchain adoption, I think it's going to be a lot of private chains. I just don't see enterprise, which typically drives adoption, obviously with new technology, being very motivated to adopt public chains because there's a level of control that they need, and there's a level of speed and performance they need with chains. So for us, we still need that level of performance, and we need a level of security for our shoppers when it comes to their data. So we're very bullish on a few public chains, but things like proof of stake needs to come into play, validation scale needs to come into play, and so we're bullish on public chains. I really don't see a world where we would move to a private chain. We need these public chains to mature, and to mature fast. We're right now starting to write down our 250,000 shoppers to Ethereum. The amount of transactions, the amount of network usage that we represent is kind of scary. We're probably between now and the end of the year be top 3 dApps on Ethereum. And while that sounds kind of cool and it sounds like we've achieved a lot, at the same time, that's only 250,000 users. We need public chains to scale and scale quick. And I think if those infrastructures mature and kind of show up and become available, I think that would give startups an opportunity to build more on chain, and give maybe enterprises an opportunity to look at what building on a public chain could look like. But right now, obviously IBM with Hyperledger and Microsoft with Coco and their blockchain projects have done a really good job of giving enterprise a point of view on how to start leveraging chains. And I don't think the public chains have done that.